I debated Charlie Kirk one-on-one, face-to-face, for over an hour on just one topic, on abortion, trying to get to consensus, get to agreement, or at least trying to convince the other person that we were coming from the morally correct position. We didn't reach that consensus in that debate, but we did it under the effort to do so because that is how people in a democracy, that is how people in a free country handle their differences, with discourse, with debate, with conversation. Well, a big part of that died when Charlie Kirk died just a few days ago. Charlie Kirk was assassinated, as you surely know by now, at a university in Utah that he was speaking at and debating students, doing the prove me wrong thing he often did. And this is a deep, enormous tragedy for our country, of course, for his family, to whom I send deep and sincere condolences to. And yet at the same time, in this crazy place we are at in this country, it was also yet another school shooting. And that same day there was a school shooting that barely got any coverage, as most of them don't anymore because it's become so commonplace. And I wonder what's happening to this country. Yes, there have always been periods of violence. There has always been violence, but it seems we've become so desensitized to what used to shake us to our core. And we can't allow that to happen, because when you become desensitized to human tragedy, you lose your humanity. And when you're no longer human, you can justify such horrible things. You know, so many people in the wake of this tragic shooting were happy about it. And that was very difficult. That has been very difficult to see those people on the left, the side of the aisle that I have always identified as part of, gleeful or saying good riddance. And that is not okay. That is not an okay position to have. You know, that's the kind of thinking that leads to the kind of dehumanization that leads to someone to eventually, God forbid, pull a trigger on somebody. Supposedly the assassin killed Charlie because he thought Charlie was spreading hate, and that hate couldn't stand. And so he killed him? He hated the fact that he was spreading hate, and so he murdered him. Could there be a more hateful act? If this person was truly so against what he perceived to be the spreading of hate by Charlie Kirk, he somehow justified it in his brain that it would be okay to murder that person. And that wouldn't somehow make him instantly so much worse than what he was claiming to try to, on some kind of moral high ground he felt, to stop? How twisted have we become when we think that murdering somebody is a valid way to show that you're against hate? How lost have we become? And at the same time, I've been equally disturbed and disgusted by those on the right who are calling for war over this, calling for civil war. Not just people on social media, people on television, news anchors, leaders, even the president, blaming the radical left before they knew who the shooter was, listing political violence and intentionally skipping over every instance of political violence against people on the left from people on the right. Well, that's no kind of leader, to use your friend's murder as a piece of political, as a political football that you can immediately use to just ratchet up the temperature and push your agenda forward. That is not okay. That disqualifies you as a leader. And yet you were elected, and so you should be allowed to lead. And those who have tried in this horrible trend of political violence to end the president's political life by ending his life are every bit as horrible. You just can't do that. You cannot take the law into your own hands. You cannot take justice into your own hands. No human being has the right to be judge, jury, and executioner on someone's life, no matter how abhorrent you find them to be, because then we've lost all moral fiber, all moral character. And what do we have left once we lose that? Not much. What we have left is a place that is becoming more and more difficult to live in, a place that has become more coarse, more divided, more polarized. And so many have said this who don't agree with Kirk, and I feel the need to say it as well, that I didn't agree with most things Charlie Kirk said. I found many of the things he said to be divisive, to be race baiting, to be marginalizing of groups that just didn't need it, to be honest. Understand, no matter how much you disagree with somebody, it is never okay to turn to violence. It's just not. If that person is not putting your life directly in harm's way, and you don't need to take an immediate act of self-defense to stop it. It is never okay. Who are we to have people celebrating it and to have people on the other side saying, let's triple down and create a civil war over this? Something has to be done about social media. We've been just battling each other and getting angrier and angrier at each other because social media companies want to make more and more and more money with algorithms that are trained to just keep us outraged and keep our eyeballs on these screens angry and focused as long as possible. We definitely have to go back to social media that did not have these algorithms, that just used to be real-time feeds of who we choose to follow, and not machines ruining our brains and ruining our society. And we need to start focusing on our commonalities more than our differences. I've always thought the two-party system is so stupid because inherently built into the system is this discord and this anger at each other. And I wish we could get rid of the party system. Maybe one day we can. But we can certainly realize that party is less important than country, and country is less important than humanity. The bigger group should always be what concerns us most. The subgroups are how we identify and the things that make us feel connected and part of community, but they aren't as important as humanity as a whole. But somehow we totally lose sight of that. So I debated Charlie when he invited me to his studio in Arizona years ago to debate abortion, and it led to that infamous meme, the dolphin fetus meme, that I know followed him around forever, and he must have not loved that. But at the same time, he was so committed to, at least despite ideas that I disagreed with, he was so committed to open exchange of ideas that he left the whole debate up on the Turning Point website. I left it up on my YouTube because it's so important to talk. Even if you get embarrassed sometimes, even if you lose an argument, it's so important to hear each other out. Listening is everything. If you want to improve your life, your relationships, your job performance, your friendships, your anything that you do, it's by listening to the other people. It's by being aware of how it affects their personality, their humanity, their heart. You can see how you affect people in real time if you truly look and if you truly listen. And I felt that Charlie did that. You know, you don't see it in these short clips. And I wish he didn't say the horrible things that he did, and I think those things were very harmful. But he also was dedicated to listening, and that is something that we can take a real lesson from. We have to debate. The debates can even get loud. He flew me to his studio in Arizona. We both researched our side of the debate. We debated at length abortion and whether it should be legal or not, whether a woman should have the right to choose or not. Our debate ended very contentiously, but he honored his agreement. He was an upstanding person in that respect. He paid my bills for flying out there and covered my meals, including my dinner, even after our debate ended contentiously, because that's the right thing to do. And I was grateful for that. And I was grateful that instead of just being in an echo chamber and speaking to his own side only and trying to convert people only to his own side, he exposed my views to his audience. And I exposed his views to mine. If your ideas are right, you will win the argument even if people hear the opposite argument. And that's what people seem so afraid of these days. They don't want to actually listen, don't want to actually debate. But what good is that? What good is it having your morality and your values built on sand, built on such a weak structure that if anything comes by that shakes it a little bit, it crumbles to the ground? Don't you want your ideas to be those that can be challenged, and you know you still believe it because those arguments didn't win? And if they do win, to know you yourself are more important and stronger than that argument, so much stronger that you can get even stronger by admitting a mistake, by admitting you were wrong on that, by evolving your opinion. You can hear new information, and a strong person can adapt and integrate it and change their mind. A weak person is one who is so fragile that they're afraid to ever hear another idea, and if they accidentally hear one, afraid to absorb it and let it in and integrate it because they'd have to admit that they're wrong. Yeah, that's what strong people do. People of great character have no pride of ownership to an idea whose time has gone by. They dedicate themselves to improving, to evolving. And that's what I wish we all could do. Dedicate ourselves to ideas and to thinking deeply about our beliefs and to being willing to question them. And when we find ourselves at odds with each other, focusing on our common humanity and reminding ourselves of our common humanity, the things we have in common are so much stronger than the things that divide us. So in the wake of this horrible and graphic thing that we all witnessed and that his family had to and has to so viscerally experience and go through so sadly, I started thinking about what do we have in common more than what separates us. And even that debate on abortion, I always looked at it as I was on this side and he was on this opposing side, and we saw it completely differently. And I didn't realize the more beautiful fact that in that debate, we both value human life so much that our debate was just about trying to define when it begins. Does it begin here or here for this hopefully very long life we get to live? And so we were actually so much closer to agreeing, and our values were so much closer to agreeing on this particular topic. And you can do that in any situation. You can realize that we argue over these little details, and they may be important to figure out, but they can only be figured out in a way that keeps the civility and the humanity centered if you remember that it's all for the same goal. All of us are trying to lead successful, happy, satisfied, peaceful lives. We're trying to put food on the table for ourselves and our families, for our loved ones. We're trying to build a nation we can be proud of, a community we enjoy living in, to have some financial security so that life isn't always challenging and hard, and trying to live by a moral code that we believe is the right way to live. And we have all of those values in common, all of us, every single one, save the very few evil crazies out there. Almost all of us have those same values and those same goals. And if we can remember that, and if we can focus on that, even when we're disagreeing, even when we're at odds with each other, you'll be able to shake hands at the end of that interaction, like Charlie and I did at the end of our debate. And he continued following me on social media, and I continued following him, because even though we disagreed strongly, I think we both thought maybe there's something we can see there that might be eye-opening at some point down the line. And because someone lost sight of that possibility, lost sight of that humanity, they won't be able to see any ideas that could have come from him down the line because they decided to take his life. And that's the tragedy. To be so unwilling to hear an idea that you need to end that person's life because your ideas are so fragile, how deeply sad. I hope anybody watching this can commit in their hearts to always being open to being wrong, to always being open to hearing new ideas, because if you lose that, then you've lost everything. I'm Ben Gleib for Rebel HQ. Let's try to love each other a little better. Let's try to listen a little deeper. Let's try to remember all that we have in common is so much more important and more powerful than the things that divide us. Sending you all a lot of love.